Hi everyone, this is just going to be a kind of introduction to the tools and materials that we're going to be using to make our board game inserts. Now, we're going to be using just an offcut of some of the board I've been using, and this is Foamcore. So if you can see very close up, it won't focus, but it's a GoPro, it won't focus on it. But you've got a very thin piece of card sandwiching a piece of foam and another piece of card on the other side, which basically gives you a very, very lightweight material, and it's very, very easy to cut, and it's very rigid. It does bend. You can get a piece. I've got a scrap here, and you can bend it, and it will bend fairly easily. You could also bend it into a corner if you really wanted to. Obviously, that's not what you're going to be doing. Now, this was a piece of A1 board, which now I've got as a smaller piece. This has been used for making a couple of different board games, or a couple of different inserts. But I'm just going to talk you through some of the materials first. If you want to know what exactly I'm using, I have got another video, and I may also put the same links in this description. But for this video, I'm using a couple of different things. I'm using a cutting mat, which cost about £4. The knife set, which is this one, which is the Rolson 17-piece hobby knife set, and this is actually more useful than I originally thought. It comes with 2 handles and this little scribe tool, which is just like a little thin pointer. I'm assuming it's a scribe tool, that's what I've been using it for. It also comes with a selection of other blades and a little magnetic thing. But these knives is what I'm going to be using to cut material. I wouldn't recommend trying to use anything like scissors or a kitchen knife. I really don't think that would be a good idea. The other thing I'm using is a steel rule. Now, you need a metal one of these. If you don't get a metal one, it will get cut by your knife. If you're using a plastic one, it can shave off the edge of your knife. So you definitely need a steel one, so you can measure accurately, because this stops exactly at 0. It doesn't carry on, which means you can scribe a line very, very accurately. It does also go up to 30. Now, you can get bigger rulers, and it might have been better to get a slightly bigger one, so I could have drawn one continuous line that's slightly longer. But this ruler was only about £1 something, so they're very, very cheap. And you could have got a bigger one for only about an extra £1. The other thing I'm using is a hot melt glue gun. Now, this is called an Amdye. It's a 20 watts, but it says 10 watts, 20 watts. I'm not really sure what that means. It's just a very cheap hot melt glue gun. Now this isn't on at the moment, but this glue gun's just a cheap one. It has no temperature control. It takes, I think, 7.2mm, it said, glue sticks. And it did come with a massive bag with about 50 glue sticks in it. And they're just very, very small and thin. Now, this is one thing, if I was doing this again, I may consider getting a glue gun with slightly thicker or longer sticks. These ones, sometimes I will use maybe 3 or 4 of these sticks in making one box, especially because the glue gun drips an awful lot. So whenever I have the glue gun in use, I've always got it so it's dripping onto something that doesn't matter and it's not going to melt or burn. So you could either have just a piece of scrap material foam core, or just a piece of cardboard, or plastic or metal. Probably not plastic, maybe something not quite as flammable as paper, I would assume. Not that the glue is going to burn anything. So, some of the little basic principles is that I'm just going to make a little box here that I'm going to make a little base, and then I'm going to make some edges for it. I'm not really making anything specific. When you cut, you want to cut as accurately as you can. Now, the couple of things you could do is have a pencil, and I have been using pencils for quite a lot of them, but something I would recommend doing is getting a little scribe tool. And this is not going to show up very well in the video, but for example, if I wanted to make a line here, I could just use my scribe tool to draw a line. Now, for you will not be able to see that. And if I hold it at the right angle, maybe you can, but this really isn't going to show up for you. So for the purpose of the video, I'm actually just going to retrieve a pencil. pencil will show up much better, but the problem with a pencil is that it has a thickness, whereas the scribe tool is almost not thick at all. So I'm just going to make a one ruler wide piece, and I'm just going to cut this off just so you can show you a little practice piece. So I'm just going to draw a line, so you should be able to see that line now. Now I'm going to get my knife and very, very carefully go over this line. So to be honest, I didn't need to draw that line in this situation, but say I was measuring something and it needed to be exactly like 8 centimeters, then I could mark a little line with the scribe tool at this end, mark a little line at this end, exactly 8 centimeters, then I could match up the ruler along that line, then cut along it. But just for the purpose of starting simply, I'm just going to start with a very kind of simple cut. So I'm just going to cut along this rule, and you need to hold it down very firmly. Now the other thing is make sure you have a cutting mat. With this knife you will cut through things quite easily. Now I usually am fairly gentle with the Foamcore, so when I'm cutting I'll line it up and keep the knife vertical. I will not go off to one side or the other side, and I will make sure I'm cutting exactly along this line. And I'm just going to do it very gently. The first cut usually just breaks the top surface. The next one goes through the majority of the foam core, the foam section, like that. And the next one I push even harder, and that usually just goes through all the board. And when you do that, you should have a completely smooth line. Now you can tell something something worth noting is if you have a blunt knife, you will catch, and it may do. I'm trying to find an example. I don't seem to have had this problem yet. If you have a blunt knife, you will end up with edges that catch. I think this piece has slightly caught on this end, and instead of being a completely smooth cut, has come out a bit like crooked. So this piece is an exact width of this. It's exactly the right width, which is fantastic. Now if I was measuring stuff out, you'd obviously measure it out as big as you need. Now I've just cut a piece as a demo, but I'm now going to measure a piece that's say 5 centimeters by 5 centimeters. So I'm just going to measure on this piece. I'm going to put my ruler on this piece at 5 centimeters. I'm then going to use a pencil or a scribing tool. I'm just using a pencil for the video. I'm going to draw a little line as close to the 0 as I can on one piece, and I'm also going to mark the same line at the bottom, so it's almost going along the edge of the ruler. And that is 5. The scribe tool is much more accurate for this. And again, it's 5 centimeters square, so I'm just going to do 5 centimeters here. And I'm going to measure along this line 5 centimeters, and this is then going to be the corner. So that the line is going to be going along here and along there. So this is our piece. Now this is only small, I'm just showing you a little practice. And I'm going to get my knife. If you do have a little offcut, just put the knife into the piece of foam, and then you can just leave it on your table and it's not going to cut anything, and you don't have to keep putting it away in its box. Now I'm just going to again do exactly what I've done. Now this depends on whether you're left or right-handed. I'm left-handed, I'm going to be cutting from this side to my left. If you were right-handed, you would be cutting from the left to the right. You always want to cut from the corner to the edge of the board. So I'm going to be cutting from the corner here along to the edge over here. And if I cut the other way from this side across, if I was right-handed, it would end up that it's kind of the wrong way round and you're cutting into the board rather than away. So I'm going to find my corner and just gently cut along that line once, twice, and 3 times. Now I'm going to do the same thing again, and I'm going to cut from the right to the left. So I'll put my knife lined up on this corner. Put my knife against it, put my ruler against it, keep my knife upright, and if I actually manage to cut it, cut along that gently, slightly harder, and slightly harder again. And it should come out. If it doesn't, you might not have cut properly, so just go over your lines once more. I'm assuming one of these hasn't gone right through. I think it's just that the corner hasn't been perfectly cut. So I'm just going to flip this over. And, alright, I can see where it is. It's just one of these lines hasn't gone right through. There you go. Okay, so now I've cut this. Now I'm going to show you what I've just done that's wrong, and I'm going to explain why it's wrong. And I'll use one of these to show you. This is one of my cuts. This is a bad cut. This is a good cut. This cut is completely flush. There is no gap. This cut, there's a lot of gap. It's not too bad, but it's not perfect. It's certainly not what we wanted. So 5 centimeters. It seems like I've cut 5 centimeters here and 5 and a bit here. So I actually haven't messed up too badly, and I'm just going to fix it. So I'm just going to carefully cut off a tiny slither of the material. Now this, I think, was caused by probably me just not doing it properly because I'm on video. Now that is a completely flush line. So all I'd done is I'd cut and somehow gone wide at one end. So instead of cutting a straight line, I'd cut it slightly at an angle. And I had a tiny bit of material extra. I'm just going to get rid of the dust and chuck that. Now I have a piece of foam core. Now I'm just going to show you a little bit of marking. And this is something I use when I'm just designing my board games. But I have a piece that I cut off, which is this piece. And if I was going to, say, make the edge of this box, I'm going to stick it on here. And just to show you from the right angle, if I put this board on the edge, it takes up 5 millimeters. This is 5 millimeter foam core. If you put it up against your ruler, it's exactly 5 millimeters. So I'm going to cut a piece of this to go along one of the edges. Now this needs to be 5 millimeters. But when I do one of these and the other one of these, the pieces that then go this way are not going to be 5 millimeters as well. They're going to be 1/2 centimeter less for this side and 1/2 centimeter less for the other side. So this is going to be 5 centimeters, 5 centimeters, then 4 and 4. So I can measure this all out and get my pencil, and on one edge I'm going to do 5 millimeters, or 5 centimeters, sorry, 5 centimeters, 4 centimeters, and another 4 centimeters. And I'm going to do the exact same thing on this side. And just flip it over and do 5 millimeters, 5 millimeters, and then 4 millimeters, and 4. Now this is something that you will always need to do when you're measuring your boxes. It's something I almost forgot on a couple of my designs, and ended up having to cut something again and measure things because I'd slightly messed up. Now get my knife, and you don't really need to do a cross score, you just need to line up one side of the ruler and the other side of the ruler perfectly. Then I can cut gently, slightly harder, and that's gone through straight away. So now I have one of the edges. Now line my ruler up again. Cut across gently. The gentle cut is just to start off the cut, because if you cut along in one big firm action, it might go wrong. If you're pushing too hard, you're not being as accurate, and you might end up going off to the side like I have done in some of the other ones. Now, I've got 2 of the 5s, and then I have my 4s. I'm just going to cut this small end piece off very quickly. Get get this small piece out of the way. And then cut this piece in half. And hopefully, if all has gone well, I will have lots of nicely measured pieces and they'll all fit together just as I want. So we have one piece here, one piece here, and we should have a piece that fits perfectly in the middle of those, like this. Now sometimes it isn't all completely perfect, but this is almost exactly what we want. Now something to bear in mind is that the glue is thick. It is not a contact adhesive, as in some liquid glues will touch one surface, touch the other surface, and then they will stick them together. Some things will, such as this kind of glue, are a thick gloop, and that gloop will stick to both surfaces and squidge them together, but they will have a small gap where the glue is sitting. So you end up that actually you get a slight thickness if you aren't pushing these together really, really well. Now, something else that's worth noting is that I do not have a square. A square is a tool to measure right angles and put in a corner when you're gluing something in order to make sure it is a complete right angle. Now, alternative for this is to cut a piece that you can use as a corner, and if you do that, you can almost guarantee that that piece is going to be at a right angle. And then when you glue the next piece on, that is just going to go against this piece, and you line it up with this edge. And it kind of isn't necessary, but makes it slightly easier. Now, something I've used on some of the bigger board game inserts I've made, well, on the bigger one of the two I've only made Tokaido and Munchkin. But on Tokaido, I used the Munchkin board game box, which obviously is right angle. It's made to be square. Not to be square, but to have 90-degree corners. And that went together perfectly fine. So with this, I'm just going to turn on my glue gun, because now I've measured these pieces out. That's kind of all I needed. So just turning the glue gun on. And before I glue these two pieces together, I'm just going to get a couple of scraps and we'll practice on these. The glue gun will take a second to warm up. Well, not a second, it'll probably take a minute or two. But I'll just continue talking about exactly what some of these pieces will be, kind of some of the things that you'll need to bear in mind when you're gluing these pieces together. Now, something I did when I first made my board game, I made the Tokaido one first. What I did is I stuck together all these pieces first. So I did that, glued these all together, then had this piece on. And I made this kind of shape, but imagine this on the scale of a whole board game. The problem I ran into is that once I'd done this, and didn't do that, once I'd glued these pieces together, I then had to put glue on the entire upper surface, or the entire bottom surface, and I then stuck the bottom on like that. And that worked really badly, and I didn't at the time have much experience. I'd never really glued much together like this. I have done design technology in school, but I never kind of did anything of this scale. And the problem with that is that when I was putting the glue on, if you imagine I was putting the glue on around this corner, or this edge, and then around this edge, when I was doing it on a 30cm square board game, almost, by the time I'd done all of these edges and got back to this side, and most of this side was setting. And when hot melt glue sets, it becomes a solid and it will not squidge flat, which meant when I glued the base on, it didn't glue on flat, it glued on with a big gap between it on half of the board. So what I'm going to show you is my second and improved way of doing this, and that is to glue on one edge. So you cut everything out almost first, then you glue on one piece, then the next piece, then the next piece, and then the last piece, and you kind of sandwich everything together. Now, I'm also going to cut another piece, just very quickly, and I'm going to do this in a really amateurish way that's not what I would recommend doing, but for the speed of the video is what I'm going to do. So I've just cut another piece out, and this piece is too long. It actually needs to be 4 centimeters. So I'll just correct that. Again, ignore the fact I'm not measuring, bad practice, but I'm trying to make a video that's not too boring and long. Now, I'm just testing the glue on, this is just scrap. The glue is almost molten, not perfectly. So I've cut another piece, so now I have 3 cross beams and 2 edges. And these are obviously going to be spaced out. But I'm just going to show you another problem that I ran into, which is, say I've made this. If I wanted to put this piece in, it's going to be a very, very tight squeeze to get that in with glue on both these edges that I'm touching. So the other thing I'm going to show you is how to do all of this. Now, something else, I'll just quickly mark on this piece the 1/2 centimeter kind of edges. And this 1/2 centimeter is basically what is going to be taken up by the board. And if I just get a rule, I can score those lines just so I can visualize exactly what's going on. And this is, if you want to kind of improvise your designs, which is kind of what I did on mine, this is something you probably have to do in order to make everything fit, because you're going to need to either build it and then make mistakes, or design it in lines and then make mistakes. So I've got pieces like on here, got another piece on here, and I've got these shorter pieces either side. I'm then also going to in between I'm going to put a piece kind of down the middle here, just to kind of show you what you can do. And I could even, if I really wanted to be kind of not silly, but if I wanted to put another kind of piece in, I could do it even differently. So I'm just going to measure how thick this piece is, and this is 1 centimeter. So I'm going to measure 1 centimeter in from this side here, and draw that line on. The board is then 1/2 centimeter thick, and that is again another 1 centimeter. So it's going to be going here. So that is where this piece will go, like that. I will then have these 2 pieces going here, and these 2 pieces going here and here. So I've just cut these pieces out just to show you how things all fit together in a kind of more in like a more realistic situation when you're making your insert. This is just very compressed, so I don't have to waste a lot of material. But I'll just test the glue to make sure the glue's kind of the right temperature. Although, from the looks of things, it's been dripping all over the place and has done this. The glue gun likes to kind of melt and drip. Now, I'm just going to glue these pieces together. This glue gun will not squeeze glue out if it does not have another stick to push. So you have to very, very gently kind of squidge out a small amount of glue. Now, you don't put loads on, like I've just done there. If you do, you might run into some problems of the glue kind of clumping when you're gluing 2 pieces together. But if it's molten, you should be able to just very, very quickly push it together. Now, where I put lots of glue, it's done this. It's kind of bulged out the side. And that's not a great idea. You can solve that, and it's also bulged out the inside as well. So that's a bad idea, but it glues and it sets. And that's why I chose hot melt glue. A lot of the other guides on YouTube all recommended using PVA glue. And PVA glue might be stronger, it might be simpler in the fact that you don't have to have a hot melt glue gun warming up or anything like that. It's also safer, I suppose, for kids that wanted to make board game inserts. The only problem with it is that it takes hours to set. This takes that long, and this is now very, very kind of glued together. Especially if you had several joints, it would go together perfectly fine. You would not have any problems. Now I'm just going to finish marking up all this. Just drawing where the kind of central beam will go. And it's another 1/2 centimetre thick board. So I'll just draw that line across. Like that. Okay, so this is what we're going to be making, is this. And this is just a very kind of simple shape. But hopefully it should teach you kind of the things that you might need to know in order to make a bigger sized box from your own design. You can either look one up or not. It's up to you. Now again, my glue gun does this. It just drips glue out the front of it, and I'm just going to start to kind of put stuff together. So I'm going to start with a base, and I'm going to keep wiping the glue off because it keeps squirting out by itself. I'm going to glue one edge like this. I'm just going to put that piece on. Put my glue gun to the side, make sure it doesn't drip everywhere, and hold that to 90 degrees. You can use this cutting board as well. That's quite a simple way of getting 90 degrees. And you just want to hold it together for like 5 seconds. But once that's kind of there, that's done. That's this piece done. There's literally no glue coming out the side and no glue coming out the inside. So that was a good application of glue. Now, you kind of want to work from the inside out. I've stuck on one edge and I can now work out from that edge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick this piece along here. Now, the only thing I'm noticing is that where this piece is slightly too long. And I'm just going to do my improvisational cutting and get my knife out and cut off a super tiny thin piece of material. And hopefully, when I put this piece back on, it will line up much better along this bottom line. So when I glue this in, especially because if I glue this on this side or on this side here, it might stick out slightly. So I'm just going to get my glue gun, which is still squirting glue all over the place. Even bigger pile of glue now. I'm just going to put glue along one of these edges and down the rest of this edge, and then stop. Put glue into the side. And again, try and do this quickly. Stick your piece where your guide is, push it, make sure it's gluing, and then that should be fine. Now, I didn't check that this was completely vertical, which is probably something I should do. So I can get a 90-degree piece, put that in, make sure it's roughly upright, take that piece out. Now I've got the kind of basis, beginning pieces thing of my insert. I then want to put this piece on. I don't want to put this edge on, and I don't want to put this edge on, because if I put that edge on, this piece I'm not going to stick in very well. So I'm going to stick this tiny piece in. So, get my glue gun, a little bit of glue down here, tiny bit on the bottom, and stick that piece in its place. Again, try and keep it upright. It's not a huge deal if it isn't completely upright, but it's just better to try and get it upright. And that piece is now in place, so we now have this kind of shape. Move some bits out of the way. So we then have these two edges, and once these two are in place, which shouldn't be too long, we can then stick this base in. And hopefully you will kind of be getting what we're kind of doing. Now, something I've just noticed is that this edge here, you might be able to see, has kind of got these crackly bits, and this is where the knife's caught, probably because I was cutting it a bit quick. What you want to do in this situation is, if the other edge on the opposite side is okay, put this ugly face down. So I'm going to get my glue stick, glue along one edge and down the whole of this other edge. And again, I've just realised I have a slight problem, is that I need to glue along this piece. So I'll put glue along there, and try and work as quickly as you can, but you have got like 20 seconds before the glue really starts setting majorly. It stays quite soft for a while. Make sure to hold the piece in to get it to kind of glue where you want it. It does have a tendency to drift. And there we go. So this is looking a bit better now. It's not got very much use. I suppose I could technically kind of put a pencil in there. Little pencil holder. Now I could again put this piece on, but by now you should be kind of realizing what problem that would cause, which is that this piece then would have to squeeze in that gap. So what I'm going to do is think about the problem first and not put this piece on, and instead put this piece on. So I'm going to look at which side is more ugly and stick the ugly side in. Glue along the edge. Always make sure you're looking at what sides need gluing first before you're kind of rushing into it. Put your piece in the corner. Make sure it's lined up. And any excess glue, if you really want to, you can just use your fingers. Not a fantastic idea. My glue gun is not very, very hot. Glue guns I've worked with in the past have problems where the glue is really burning. And if you aren't careful, it will just stick to you, and once it's stuck to you, you're in trouble. Now this is again another little thing that's worth noting. If I'm gluing this piece in here, I'm going to need glue down here, 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 and along that bottom edge. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to glue a piece of glue onto this, I'm going to glue onto here. So I'm going to get my glue gun, pull the trigger out of the way, not the trigger thing, whatever it's called. Glue along there, glue along here, glue along here, and glue along there. Put my glue gun back and put my piece on. Squish it down. I used a little bit too much glue there, but it's alright, it's not too much of a problem. And squish the glue. The glue is quite nice to kind of take off when it's half set. It's almost like a rubber, so you can just kind of squeeze it and pull it out of the way. You might find you get these stringy pieces that just come constantly squeezing out of your glue gun. When the glue is hot and you pull it, it will just keep going and going and going. So just checking on my glue gun. So turn my glue gun off, and I can now just kind of talk about problems I ran into and ways I got around stuff. So, apart from me rushing this to try and get it done, it's gone together alright. I've noticed this vertical section isn't symmetrical, or isn't vertical, but the rest of the box, if I line it up on my sheet, is exactly 5 by 5, and it's 3.5. Not 3.5? 3 and a bit. Oh, it's the thickness of the ruler, wasn't it? Around this edge, plus 0.5 millimeter. So it's come together all right. But the way I did it, the assembly process is what you need to concentrate on. This is just a little test piece, so it makes no difference whether it is really precise or not. But you need to remember where to work from. If I'd have glued all these edge pieces together first and then stuck the bottom on, I would have run into the problem of glue starting to set and then not sticking together as flush as it has done. You can see there's a slight gap, but very, very little, which isn't too much. There's also a lot of messy glue that's just stuck onto the sides. You can use your knife to cut this off, but again, it doesn't matter in this situation. So that's one of the problems, was gluing the base on. Once the base is on in that situation, then I realised it was very difficult to put the inside pieces in. Now, the way I do it is to make the base, set out on the base, either drawing it or scribing it, exactly where you want all the pieces to go and where you wanted compartments, and then measure out how big those pieces are and cut them all out. Once they're cut out, you can glue everything together much quicker. And gluing things together quicker is good, because especially when you have a cheap glue gun, the glue will just drip out of it like crazy. I'll show you my glue catcher. Has quite a lot of glue just sitting all over it now, and that is wasted. You probably might be able to find a way of reusing it, but it's just going to go in the bin based on how cheap it is. And working quickly kind of makes things better, but it's best not to rush. Obviously I was rushing because I want to make this video not too long. It's half an hour and a bit so far, but you have to kind of glue things together from the inside out. If you put the outside together first, then the bottom, and then the inside, it just doesn't work. So you need to have a base, make the design on the base, put on 1 or 2 edges, and then work inwards. We'll work from the inwards out, sorry. So work from one side across and make sure you're putting in little pieces that are going to be trapped first. So this piece went in before I put on this edge, so it didn't have 2 edges and then have to slide against them. But hopefully you've kind of learned a little bit from this, and you can therefore avoid some of the problems and kind of difficulties I ran into. But again, just try and practice. Doing this little piece that's kind of me practicing, helps me. I'm doing it purely for the video, as well as I suppose it makes me slightly better at building this. And it's very cheap. The material I've only used a really small piece from here and a couple of strips from this edge, and it probably, materials for this is probably like 10-20p, and it helped my skills in making this, and it's taught hopefully you how to put something like this together. But let me know if you have any questions or any comments. Ignore the fact that a lot of this was all very rushed and therefore not as kind of professional as I would have liked, or you might have liked or expected. But it teaches you the kind of the principles that you might need to know. So hopefully it's been useful. So thank you for watching. I will be making a kind of a video, whether I'm talking through it the whole way or whether it's just me filming my process. It's probably more going to be that. But hopefully you kind of enjoyed this and learnt from it, and maybe inspired you to try and do this on your own. Because it really is quite simple. You don't need to be a professional. I am not a professional. I did a GCSE in design technology and also an A-level in product design, so I have some skills, but nothing that really helped me to do all of this. And I've just learned from watching some YouTube videos and doing it myself. So let me know if any of you do decide to give this a go, and if you do run into any problems. If so, let me know and I'll try and help you if I can. But thank you very much for watching, and hope you enjoyed the video. Goodbye.